L'honorable député de Abitibi-Témiscamingue.
Member for Abitibi-Témiscamingue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On April 7th, I put a question to the Associate Defense Minister. The question was about Plan B for the F-35s. What is Plan B? What's the timetable? How many planes? How much will they cost? Lots of questions that remain unanswered. On April 3rd, the Auditor General's office published their spring report, and they are pitiless about the F-35. The Conservatives hid the real costs of acquisition of the F-35s. The Auditor General confirmed that the government knew the cost overruns of the program for a long time. They had an internal and external register with a $10 billion difference by coincidence. The minister, the associate minister, repeated the same thing over and over again without even bothering to change a few words. Now these talking points have changed given the situation. They've accepted the recommendations but not the responsibility. The funds were frozen. A 7-point plan was implemented. So once again, good talking points. Today the government has 4 minutes instead of 30 seconds rather to answer. So I'd like to get an answer that makes a bit more sense. Now that there's an interdepartmental secretariat in place, I'd like to know where this file stands. Maybe the government could inform us on certain points. The Auditor General talked about the lack of communication between Public Works and National Defence, and the refusal to share relevant information requested by Public Works from the Department of National Defence. Let me quote, "We noted that National Defence delayed informing PWGSC about the decision-making process, which harmed the latter's ability to exercise its contractual authority and ensuring that there was integrity in the acquisitions process. PWGSC did not obtain the required documents nor the results of an analysis that was conducted." So I'd like to see where communications stand between these two departments. Are all documents being transmitted in a timely manner to the Secretariat? Will it take many months once again before required information is delivered? Will unilateral decisions keep on being taken? There was the testimony of Kevin Page before the Public Accounts Committee, which confirmed what we thought. The Conservatives deliberately hid information about the real costs of the F-35. DND also admitted that they were aware of 2 different records instead of the real costs. In addition to the NDP, the Auditor General clearly denounced the lack of transparency on the part of this government on this matter. Today I heard the Minister of Public Works and Government Services say during question period, "We expect that the Department of National Defence will be as transparent as possible and provide complete information in its new estimates of the F-35s for all parliamentarians." So I would like to see a maximum transparency, so I'd like to know where this file now stands, how the Secretariat is operating. Do we have any information? There was consultation for alternatives. Is there a Plan B? Was there any consultation of other aircraft makers? So where do they stand to replace these jet fighters? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Opportunity to thank the member opposite, because this gives me an opportunity as a granddaughter of 3 World War II veterans to talk about the pride I have in the plan our Conservative government has put forward to make sure that we reassert the facts about the CF-18 replacement. So let me begin. As my colleague is well aware, we need to replace our fleet of aging CF-18s, which have been a tremendous asset for the Canadian Forces. The commitment to purchase a CF-18 replacement fleet was clearly spelled out in the Canada First Defence Strategy. Our government has set a budget for replacement aircraft, and we will work within that budget. As of this moment, we have not signed any contracts to purchase replacement aircraft. As my colleague is well aware, we have announced a 7-step plan to guide responsible replacement of our brave men and women's fleet. This includes a secretariat to oversee that this important procurement meets the highest standards of accountability and transparency. Let me take a moment to outline 7 important points regarding the secretariat. The funding envelope allocated for the acquisition of replacement fighter jets is frozen. The Government of Canada will immediately establish a new secretariat within the Department of Public Works and Government Services Canada, and the secretariat will play the lead coordinating role as the government moves to replace Canada's CF-18 fleet. A committee of deputy ministers will be established to provide oversight of the secretariat, and the Department of National Defence, through the new secretariat, will provide annual updates to Parliament. And these updates will be tabled within a maximum of 60 days from receipt of annual costing forecasts from the Joint Strike Fighter Program Office, beginning in 2012. The Department of National Defence will also provide technical briefings as needed through the Secretariat on the performance schedule and costs. The Department of National Defence will continue to evaluate options to sustain a Canadian Forces fighter capability well into the 21st century. Prior to project approval, Treasury Board Secretariat will first commission an independent review of DND's acquisition and sustainment project assumptions and potential costs for the F-35, which will be made public. Treasury Board Secretariat will also review the acquisition and sustainment costs of the F-35 and ensure full compliance with procurement policies prior to approving the project. Industry Canada, through the new Secretariat, will continue identifying opportunities for Canadian industry to participate in the Joint Strike Fighter global supply chain, as well as other potential benefits for Canada in sustainment, testing, and training, and will provide updates to Parliament explaining the benefits. Canada has not purchased any replacement aircraft and has not signed any contract to do so. Canada will only proceed with replacing the CF-18s when all of the steps that I just mentioned are complete and development work is sufficiently advanced. I would urge the members opposite, particularly the member who is speaking this evening, to really take into consideration the needs of our men and women in uniform, the needs of our Canadian Air Force. They do a tremendous job protecting our interests. They deserve to have the best equipment, and in a timely fashion. I'd urge that member to really reconsider her position when she votes against our military equipment and sustainability model. Thank you.
The honourable member for Abitibi-Témiscamingue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Although the voice of the parliamentary secretary is more melodious than that of the 2 ministers, I admit that these are the same talking points that I've been hearing unceasingly, and there's no new information. I gave her an opportunity to give us concrete answers after having gotten vague answers, but she didn't take that opportunity. So I'd like to know, does the Interdepartmental Secretariat have all the information necessary to give proper figures to Canadians and parliamentarians? Will it lead a transparent call for tenders? Will it make the ministers a little more responsible for this fiasco? Yes, there will have to be a secretariat for the fiasco.
And I'm disappointed to hear the member opposite speak in such a fashion. To be very frank with you, I've never heard the 2 ministers talk about being a granddaughter of 3 World War II veterans. I'm offended by her lack of compassion. I'm offended by her insinuation that I read off speaking points and simply tried to somehow maneuver around the question. I answered the question as truthfully as possible. I answered the question with some passion because I care about my grandparents, I care about future grandparents, I care about my children and their children and future generations. And for that member to question my dedication to Canadians in this manner, to question my grandparents' service to this country, it's offensive, and I think I'm owed an apology. Nevertheless, this government is going to continue on this path to defend our brave men and women in uniform, provide them with the equipment that they so deserve to continue the wonderful job they've done over many, many years and more years to come. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The motion to adjourn the House is now deemed to have been adopted.